There's a video that Jordan Peterson put out a few days ago that I've just been dying to respond to ever since I saw it. They had him, Dennis Prager, and a few others discussing porn in marriage, and I was completely shocked at what I heard. I honestly don't think that I could have disagreed more. So let's go through the clip together and talk about it.
I am less interested in the interior person, morally speaking, than you are. Largely, I do believe, because I come from a behaviorist, law-based religion. We care how you act. That's why we don't have a claim that if you look at another woman with lust, it's as if you've committed adultery with her. Obviously, Christianity and Judaism are not identical religions, and we have no equivalent that if you look upon another woman with lust, it's as if you have committed adultery with your heart. There's only one way to commit adultery in Judaism, and it's with a different organ. And I'm not being cute, I'm being very realistic. Looking with lust is not a sin in Judaism.
All right, to pause right there, Prager is right in the sense that Jesus did care about the inside world, and one of the reasons why is because sin always starts with the inside world. People don't commit adultery out of nowhere. It always starts with a lustful thought, so it makes sense to watch your thoughts. This might be why Job, in the Old Testament by the way, he said, "I made a covenant with my eyes not to look with lust at a young woman." Or we could even point to Deuteronomy 5:21 that says that you shouldn't covet your neighbor's wife, which most people believe means that you shouldn't desire your neighbor's wife. And about this verse, later on in the conversation, Dennis himself even says,
I can be attracted to my neighbor's wife. I can't want her. There's a difference.
But wanting another man's wife is internal and happens inside of a person.
I am less interested in the interior person, morally speaking, because I come from a behaviorist, law-based religion.
Now, I could very well be missing something here, but even given this, it does seem as though Judaism is concerned with the inner world. But there's another problem with this approach, and that's the fact that changing someone's actions doesn't necessarily entail a change of heart. When people commit horrendous crimes and break the law, it's not a rule issue, it's a heart issue. Putting laws in place does keep some crimes at bay, but if you change hearts, you wouldn't even need the laws to begin with. This is one of the reasons why Jesus was so hard on the Pharisees who, although they looked good on the outside, they were wicked on the inside. Jesus said rather than cleaning the outside of the cup, they should clean the inside of the cup, and then the outside would also be clean. Here, Jesus saw the importance of getting to the root of the issue and having people change from the inside out. So now, after hearing Prager's position on the issue, listen to the excellent follow-up question that Jordan Peterson has for him.
Looking with lust is not a sin in Judaism.
What's the stance on pornography? So
pornography, when I'm asked this question...
Just to put you on the spot,
You did indeed. Okay, so my answer, when it's raised on my radio show, I have a male-female hour, and I'm very open about sexual subjects. I always ask if a wife calls me and says, my husband looks at pornography, I found on his computer, I have one question. How is your life of intimacy with your husband? Is it good?
Yikes. I don't like where this one's heading, but let's just go ahead and hear him elaborate on it.
In other words, is the pornography in lieu of you or in addition to you? And I know this is not a religious answer, and I'm not even giving a religious answer. I'm giving what I think is a moral and realistic answer. Men want variety. And if adultery is a substitute for, if pornography is a substitute for one's wife, it's awful. If it's a substitute for adultery, it's not awful.
Okay, so here it seems that Prager seems to be arguing that porn isn't a bad thing if it's done in order to stop a man from committing adultery. But the first problem that I have with this take is that it makes it sound as if men who aren't able to be sexual with their wives will seize up and die if they aren't able to have sex. Ladies, contrary to what your husband might tell you, I don't think that that's medically accurate. Now, this isn't to say that being in that position isn't hard, because of course it is. And this is one of the reasons for why Paul argued that in marriage, both men and women shouldn't sexually deprive their spouse except for an agreed upon time. But that doesn't mean that if that happens, a man is justified in looking to satisfy his sexual desires elsewhere. Now, here's the thing that seems to be missing here. If you have an intimacy problem in your marriage, I don't think that watching porn helps you with that. It doesn't bring you any closer to your wife, it doesn't increase your intimacy, and instead, it probably has the opposite effect. Now, I understand that Prager is saying that the immediate consequences of watching porn aren't as bad as the immediate consequences of adultery, but this is to seriously underestimate all of the other potential harms that can come from watching porn, especially when watching porn is a substitute for intimacy. This just puts you at risk for all kinds of mental health issues. But let's just go ahead and hear what Jordan Peterson has to say about this.
A clinical rule of thumb that's akin to that, I would say, if you're trying to decide clinically whether someone's partaking in a habit, say use of alcohol, has reached the threshold of clinical significance, one of the things you do is ask the person you're assessing, now, is it interfering with your employment? Has it got you in trouble with the law? Is your family complaining? Does it stop you from doing other things that you should be doing? And so the judgment isn't the use of the forbidden substance itself. It is in some sense consequentialist. And I'm not saying that that's an absolute, but it is a hallmark of clinical judgment.
Dennis, you?
So here Peterson seems to be taking a more pragmatic approach from a clinical perspective by saying that a person should assess how a habit is impacting their lives. But there's something else that we should take into consideration. I think that one of the great myths about watching porn is the fact that since it's done in private, we think that it doesn't impact anyone else. The thing about porn is that even though it is done in private, porn also affects on a very real level how a man thinks and acts, especially towards women. It affects how he sees women, what he thinks of women, and how he treats women. On a far deeper level, porn impacts our deep subconscious understanding of human value and expectations, which directly influence our actions on a regular and practical level. And the thing is, the more people that it individually impacts, the greater effect that it has on our society as a whole. But listen to what Prager says next, because this is the part where things start getting worse and worse, in my opinion.
I know a man who was saintly in taking care of his Alzheimer's wife, who got Alzheimer's at the young age of 50, and watched over her and bathed her for a decade. And then, so I would just ask, you asked me about pornography. So this man was faithful to a wife with whom he could not have relations, obviously, for a decade or more. I think it went to 15 years. Would he have been wrong in relieving his sexual tension with a photograph?
Okay, so here I think that Prager is approaching this question from the wrong angle. It's the same type of reasoning that he would reject from someone who argued that grape is justification for abortion. The thing is, a bad situation doesn't necessarily make an evil action good. If anything, we're choosing between the lesser of two evils. However, there was one point in the conversation where I believe that Jonathan Pageau raised a really good point. Take a listen.
At least for me, when I hear all of this from my own Orthodox perspective, it's bewildering, because in the Christian tradition that I participate in, the call is to be transformed. The call is to be free. That's the call. Christ is calling us to be free. And so the idea of like, can you lust or can't you lust, or can you do this or not this? The answer is we have desires in us, and these desires tend to enslave us. They tend to pull us into themselves. And these laws are exterior ways for you to understand how it is that you can now be free from these desires. None of the desires are wrong. Like sexual desire isn't wrong, desire to eat isn't wrong, none of these things are wrong. The problem is when they capture you.
The subordination.
Right, and so it's not about like trying to figure out if I'm sinning or not sinning. The idea is rather that, to attend to my desires in the sense so that I'm not captured by them, so that I don't become obsessed, so that I don't fall into that.
So as you just heard, Jonathan argued that sin enslaves you, and that lusting after another woman is something that takes from you rather than something that adds to your life. Now, before you complain that this is something that only Christians believe and that is not true, go ahead and check out this video where I talk about how Billie Eilish made a similar point about how porn led to her sexual slavery rather than sexual freedom. Go ahead and click here, and I'll see you over there. And the next time that someone tries to tell you that porn is a really good thing for your marriage, what are you gonna say? What do you mean?